Welcome back then folks to another special projects build in Forza Horizon 5 to go alongside the Gran Turismo builds this week. And speaking of Gran Turismo, you will have probably recognised this one if you came up playing GT4, 5 or 6. It is of course the Gran Turismo spec, or at least visually speaking as close as you can get to it. Obviously that version has the hidden cowled headlights instead of the pop-ups, the rear wing etc. is different, but we get it as close as we can of the Starion rally car. All-wheel drive, up around 360 horses, 1270 kilos. It's a proper weapon, very like Japanese Audi Quattro kind of vibe to it within the game. And of course this one is not a livery which I've done myself, so much like in Gran Turismo, this is one of those occasions where give the player, and the design more so of course, some love from me. It's also kind of nice that in this game you can actually benefit the player. You know, it's not just love and likes, they actually get cash from using the build, which is pretty nice. So if we jump into the upgrade shop, and of course on screen I'll have shown both the tune code, obviously I did the build myself, that goes without saying, but for the paint code that will support them and give them cash if you give them likes and stuff while using it. So if we check out the spec first of all, we're running A-Class, fairly high, not quite at the peak of A-Class, so it depends if you want to go more for replica or for usability. I've opted to try and make it as close as we can reasonably get it to Gran Turismo specs, and that of course means it's not quite an A800 car. I would argue it doesn't actually need to be, and you'll see it racing against unbeatable driver tars in a second to show you what it's like in a rally scenario. As far as the motor swap though, well, first of all, actually, like I said, 360 horses, we've got 362. One of the main advantages of Gran Turismo builds is, of course, you've got weight ballast to work with, so you can 9 times out of 10 get pretty much exactly the kind of weight that you need. Whereas in Forza, it's a bit more difficult. You have to play around a bit with different parts, trying to keep it realistic, but also trying to get the weight right. Not making it too light or too heavy. Well, again, we're 1 kilo off the Gran Turismo spec, so I'm really happy with that. To be within 2 horsepower and 1 kilo, especially within A-Class still, I'm really happy with that. So 1269, 362, of course we've gone for the standard engine. That's a little bit bigger than the engine in Gran Turismo, which I believe was a 2.4. Again, it's pretty forgivable, I think. In terms of the drivetrain, of course you do want to swap to all-wheel drive, much like the actual rally car with the viscous coupling there instead of rear-wheel drive. The aero, unfortunately, is the one glaring thing, which is no way near what it looks like in Gran Turismo, and that really is a shame, but there's nothing we can do about that. As far as the tyres, fairly obviously you do want your off-roads. You could go for like the extreme knobbly off-roads, but it doesn't match it visually, and it's kind of overkill for this car. I wanted to go for a bit more of that mix of on- and off-road ability. As far as the tyres, we've got 265mm on the front, and then for the rear we're actually matching at 265, so again with the four-wheel drive system you've got that equally chunky front and rear setup. I've gone 1 up on the inch size for the rim. Might sound strange for a rally car, but the reason why I've done that is more so visually speaking, because if you take a look at the car, especially from a distance, with the standard rims, they just look so small, and the tyres look kind of lost in the wheel arch, and I wanted it to look, again, more appropriate, give it that chunky vibe, so that's what I've gone for there. Likewise on the rear, or the front and the rear, I should say, 17. As far as the rims, if we jump over to the multi-piece style, we've got those HRE Vintage. Those are very, very close, actually, to the ones in Gran Turismo, which is great. Those very, like, turbo fan style vintage rims. I've gone for a little bit of spacing. I often don't like to go full on the front because it just looks kind of ridiculous when it's sticking all the way out the side. You might want to opt to just leave them in there if you want to, but I think just a little bit looks good on the front and the rear, so I've just gone for the stage 1 on that one. Then as far as the engine, it's pretty simple for that one. So first of all, we want the racing cams. Of course, that raises your red line as well, makes it sound like a proper rally car. And for the turbo, I've gone all out with the race turbo and the anti-lag fitted. And then, and this is a little bit of a hack, it's kind of the closest thing we can get to ballast, if you will, and that is the oil and cooling and the intercooler. Because both of these, although they give you a power advantage, do drop a lot of extra weight into the car. So you want your race intercooler and the race oil and cooling as well, and if you put those things together as I have, that gets you to, obviously in addition to a bunch of other stuff, pretty spot on to the kind of specs we want to have. Speaking of the weight, you don't want to go for the upgraded flywheel or anything. I did try using stuff like the drive wheel and the flywheel, or the drive line I should say, and the flywheel, but it makes it too light, simply put. So like I said, if you do want to bump it up to A800 with a few extra things, of course you can, but this is more so for those who really want to go in on the replica side. We've got the racing brakes, because that's pretty obvious. Of course, the off-road suspension. As far as the anti-roll, that is fit to race spec on the front and the back. As far as the roll cage, again, this is a bit of a kind of finagling moment where you've got to work around what kind of weight you want to be working with. So I would recommend the second level up, basically, so not the full roll cage. I'm actually glad that I didn't have to use that, because personally I hate how the roll cage looks in cars in these games. I think it looks ridiculous. And then as far as the weight loss, you want the full spec rate. Yeah, full weight loss package. And then as far as the transmission, etc., you've already got the standard box. This is from a previous build, so you don't need to buy that one. And then as far as the driveline, like I said, that's standard, and I have gone for the off-road diff. You don't necessarily have to. You could go for the racing or the drift diff if you prefer either of those. We're going to be changing the numbers anyway, so of course it doesn't matter too much in the long run. I don't recall exactly what the cost was, but when you click to either do it yourself, or if you, download my version, it will give you the cost anyway. So as far as the numbers, top speed wise, it's a bit too quick. Again, 175 miles an hour is a bit high for a rally car, but again, in this kind of game, you do need a bit of extra top speed, even off-road. So initially I was building it to do maybe 170, but it was kind of getting up into that territory quicker than I thought it would be. So I've given it just a little bit of an extra boost, but again, you don't want sixth gear to be so long that you bog down. So it is a bit of a fine line. 4 seconds to 60, that sounds pretty good to me, especially with 360 horses. It sounds kind of appropriate. 8.8 to 100. As far as the tyres, we've got kind of a middle ground on PSI, not too overblown, but not too flat, 27 front and back. And of course, you can adjust any of this if you want to. Mess around, see if you prefer other things. You can always just come back to this and do it again. As far as the gearbox, 2.7 on the final drive, then 455, 310, 235, 185, 149 and 120. As far as the alignment, a little bit of a difference front and rear. You want to be able to kick the tail out but still be stable. So 1 degree of camber on the back, 1.5 on the front. I've opted not to mess around with the toe on this one. Again, you could if you want to. I don't think it feels entirely necessary for the car. 6 degrees of caster. Anti-roll we've evened out to 35 on the front and the back. Springs on 70, and then I've slightly adjusted the ride height on the rear just to match out with the front. It makes the front end look a little bit higher, very, very fractionally, but that's kind of how it looks in Gran Turismo, which is part of the reason why I went for that. For the dampers, I've gone 8 all round, which of course, in particular for the bump stiffness, is a significant advantage over how it comes in standard rally form, where they're super, super soft. As far as the aero, of course, that's non-adjustable. For the brakes, again, slight difference, 55% to the front, 100% on acceleration and deceleration for the diff, and I've opted for a 60% split. So plenty of grip, plenty of power still on the front end. If you want it to be more tail happy, but you'll have a little bit less control on the front, you could go up to 70. I would recommend probably having it somewhere between, say, 50 and 70. Any outside of that, obviously if you go below 50, it's going to feel like a front-wheel drive car, and if you go above 70, it gets a bit too tail happy in my opinion, but of course that's up to you. All that remains, whether you do this yourself or if you use the share code and grab the build to your car, is to show you, as I mentioned earlier on, what this thing can do in an event. In particular, a rally event that you'll see here against those unbeatable driver tars. Unbeatable is ridiculous in this game anyway. Not so much because it's unbeatable, but because they just cheat so much. Cars will just blatantly get in your way, which is really annoying. And usually this is not how I would drive. I'd just bounce off the wall, smash the cars out the way, because who cares when it's the AI? But I wanted it to look a bit more professional, at least to some degree. And at least under those circumstances, without wall riding, without crashing, you can still see that this car actually can win. Even though it's 789, which isn't quite the peak, you could definitely say 360 horsepower is not all that much for an A-class car. I'm really happy with this build. It was never the absolute greatest of rally cars in Gran Turismo, but was a really cool, unexpected choice. Likewise here in Forza, it's not going to destroy everything in its path, but if you are a Gran Turismo fan, you want to have maybe some extra flavour in there with one of your cars in Forza, or maybe for some people, can't say I've noticed a huge amount of people using the Mitsubishi Starion, it might end up giving you something to love about the car. Maybe get a bit more use out of it for, playground stuff or online racing, maybe some seasonals. You never know when it might come in handy. Maybe you need to, for example, get some accolades where you need to set some clean lap times on dirt tracks. It's the kind of car that's perfect for that sort of thing. Definitely check out the other 2 special projects which I did earlier in the week, and of course if you play Gran Turismo as well, check out those. Definitely stick around for more in future, and again you can find a link to the playlist of all of my Forza Horizon 5 vids right below in the video description. But for now, thanks for watching.